Ever try to fix a marriage the same way you fix a cybersecurity breach?
The lasagna story is kind of three parts. I asked my wife, can you make my favorite childhood meal? The one my mom had made every year for my birthday. She made it. I was sitting at the kitchen table. She sets it down in front of me. Oh, the aroma hit me. It smelled amazing. And I had these really high hopes. I was like, oh my gosh, this smells good. They were pretty much shattered. I peeked in between the noodles and there was hard-boiled eggs. So do I tell my wife, my brand new wife, who's glowing with pride, that her lasagna has just committed the unforgivable culinary crime? Most arguments, too, come from unspoken expectations. It's you and me versus the problem. When you focus on what's in your circle of influence and you let go of control and trying to focus and control other people's, your anxiety level massively decreases. 10 years later, she made the walk to my mom's house and she sat down at the kitchen table with my mom. She looked across at her and said, I gotta know, what's this recipe that David loves? I've tried everything. I've given up. Can you just share with me this amazing recipe that he apparently loves? My mom looked at her and she said, what recipe? I always bought it frozen from the store.
This episode's sponsor is a couple I absolutely love, David and Alexis Kiwi. They help power couples be successful at home just like they are at work. If you're crushing it in the business world but quietly disconnected from your spouse, you're not alone. Check them out at davidandalexiskiwi.org. They have spent years creating a simple tool set that will help you save your marriage. Don't forget to use code EXECUTIVE1 to save $500 off their 6-week coaching program. davidandalexiskiwi.org, code EXECUTIVE1. Ever try to fix a marriage the same way you fix a cybersecurity breach? David Kiwimagi did sort of that. He's a cyber incident response manager by day and a husband who tried to solve a lasagna-related standoff by staying silent. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. On today's Executive Connect podcast, David's cracking open what the world of incident response taught him about emotional intelligence, clear communication, and yes, how to win an argument and secure networks without burning down the house. Get ready for insights that go beyond the firewalls. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm excited to be here.
Now, you used to manage critical incidents in high-pressure environments, but let's rewind a bit to a different kind of incident. I'm talking about the lasagna moment. Can you walk us through that? What happened and what did it reveal?
Absolutely. So the lasagna story is kind of three parts. We'll go over those throughout this podcast. But it really started back when me and my wife were first married. I was working in healthcare doing emergency response management. I was working on the truck and we'd been married about a year. And I asked my wife, can you make my favorite childhood meal? The one my mom had made every year for my birthday. Yes, I know I did not set her up for success with that request because I had some expectations, like, yeah, I got a standard here. Oh, she did. She was like, absolutely, I got you. I was going to go make you a lasagna. She got her grandmother's recipe. She shot for all the ingredients. She made it. I was sitting at the kitchen table. She sets it down in front of me. Oh, the aroma hit me. It smelled amazing. And I had these really high hopes. I was like, oh my gosh, this smells good. They were pretty much shattered when my fork started to dig in and I hit something like rubbery, but not like a noodle, like bad rubbery. And I peeked in between the noodles and there was hard-boiled eggs. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, that's not how my mom made it. This was going through my head, right? So do I tell my wife, my brand new wife, who's glowing with pride, that her lasagna has just committed the unforgivable culinary crime? Or do I just stay silent and eat it like a good husband? The truth was, I really didn't know what to say. I was afraid of her reaction and I was afraid to hurt her feelings. So I stayed silent. I kept my mouth shut. I swallowed my pride. I swallowed the lasagna, but it didn't taste good. the lasagna especially, but also to just stay silent. That's not the first time that either one of us stayed silent throughout our marriage. In fact, over the years, when something happened and we had an unspoken expectation that went unmet, we just shut down. And this started to build, honestly, a little resentment in our marriage. Things really came to a head, though, a few years back when my wife came to me and she's like, let's start a business together. I'm like, that's a great idea. Anyway, long story short, about 30 grand in, we're not getting profit. We're not productive. And we're really just out ahead to the point my wife gave me an ultimatum. She's like, we need some coaching, some help, or something, or we're done. And she meant done in both business and possibly marriage. Like we reached a point where we were like, something had to change. And so she's like, I found this coaching. I want to do this strengths-based coaching. And I literally thought, I've already invested so much money into this business. How much is this going to cost? I kind of reached an endpoint, but I also realized something had to change. So we shifted our commitment, we shifted our focus, and we took the training. And it is not like counseling. We've tried that. That did not work. And it wasn't like therapy. It was coaching. It's a coach on a basketball, right? They're going to come up to you and be like, this is what you're doing well. You need to do it better. This is what you're good at. Focus on this. Like it's a total different approach. Well, sure enough, in just a few weeks, my wife and I learned about each other's strengths and what we're good at and what we operate well in. And we realized we were trying to force each other to be like the other person. And we're like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You have so much value to you. You have so much capability. And I started just seeing her differently and she saw me differently. Now, unlike in the first lasagna moment, right? I didn't know what to say. I know exactly what to say and how to say it in a way that she feels it. I was afraid of her feelings. I was afraid I'd hurt him. I know exactly how she feels in every scenario. I know what her drives her and what her motivations are. And I was afraid of her reaction. Now I value it. In fact, for this very podcast, I'm like, hey, I got this thing. I want to do this. What is your thoughts on it? Do you want to join me? Some podcasts we joined together. Today she's sick, unfortunately. She won't be joining us. But it completely changed everything. Now we have a thriving business. It is booming. We are loving it. And we're working together on a whole new level. The most amazing part, when we got done, she came to me and she's like, I want to do this for other couples. I want to share this for other couples. And that's how we got started in our coaching business.
I love it. So after the lasagna slowdown, there was a huge shift, like you mentioned, for the two of you guys. Something clicked. What helped you guys realize things had to change? Was there a specific moment? I know it wasn't just at home, but it was professionally. And you really pivoted how you both communicate in general, not only in your marriage, but outside the world. So, was there a specific change that happened? Or was it the training?
Well, before training, it felt like date nights were business meetings. It felt like quality time together was more just a checklist. And I was from corporate America. I'd been working cybersecurity. When you have an incident and you have a full threat ransomware, it's like, let's go, let's do this. And I just take charge. I'm very strong at command, which makes me good at handling high intensity incidences. Well, my wife is really good at relationships. And so someone who comes in and says, you should do this, yeah, that goes well in a relationship. And when I started to realize through the coaching how she thinks and how she's wired, it changed everything for me. And she started to see me. So now it's like, I appreciate how you feel in this situation and I honor your thoughts in this. Show me what it was like from your perspective. Her insights, now that I see the world through her eyes differently, has helped me on the cyber side as well. In high intensity situations, like you got ransomware, you got stuff going on, people are getting hacked and they're freaking out and they're panicking. I have so much more emotional intelligence now because I'm married to her and I've been listening to her. And that helped me at my work substantially when I was working with corporate America.
And I love that you explained that because what I heard was you listened to her, not the way you needed her to speak, but you actually listened to her from her perspective. You took off your hat and put on her hat and listened. And I love that you are layering cybersecurity into it because you're so spot on. We're reactive, we respond, we engage. We don't ask those softer questions. We don't open up what's under the hood. We just see the problem, go after. It's the fight or flight response in cybersecurity. So you've talked about three big shifts that have helped you grow. online, both in your personal life and your work. Can you walk us through what those three key things that changed everything for you were?
Oh, absolutely. There were three like key moments that shifted us in our marriage, in our business, and then I taught them to everybody at my work after I had learned them, and it changed everything. So the first one was how to turn unspoken expectations into agreements. And we all have them. Everybody has unspoken expectations. Like back when I was first married, it'd been a couple years, we had our first kid, and I'm driving home from work. Cybersecurity is stressful. And I get home from work and I'm in the driveway, walking into the front door, and I have an expectation. I'm going to be just real and vulnerable. I was newly married, so don't hold this against me. I expected, I'd walk in and the house would be clean because my wife's a stay at home mom, right? And so she has plenty of time to clean the house. And then I'd go in and dinner would be made and we'd have dinner and I'd play with my son and my newborn and we'd just have a good time. And then we'd spend some time as a family and go to bed, right? And it would just be a wonderful evening. Well, I unlocked and opened the front door, and reality hit. I navigated the landmines of the activities of the day, stepping over toys. I walk into the kitchen to not find dinner, but alas, breakfast still on the counter. And my wife is sitting on the ground with a baby stuck to her chest. And so I asked the good husbandly question, so what'd you do all day? I'm still alive. But I did. We had these expectations. And then, of course, in moments like that, whether it's a ruined lasagna, whether it's asking your boss for a raise, or whether it's getting into situations at work that are high intensity, we have an expectation of how they're going to go. In that moment, trying to solve the unspoken expectation usually doesn't go well because, and you nailed it, the fight or flight response. People get into these high intensity situations or they've super disappointment. Now they got cortisol levels that are high. Now it gets stressful. And then boom, you're in an argument. Most arguments too come from unspoken expectations. So there's a way to solve those. You can do this as a boss with your employees. You can do this with your spouse. You can do this with your manager if that's in your position, where you sit down and say, I want to do an exercise with you. I want to create our unspoken expectations into agreements. And here's what you do. You get 3 pieces of paper each. So if in this case, I'm with my wife, and on the top of each piece of paper, you write your name, you write their name, and then you write both. Now, here's what I recommend. If you are an entrepreneurial couple, which is what we mainly work with, that you sit down and you pick a category. So, for example, like the housework or the business, right? Because these lists can get really long if you put it all in one. So, and we do this like once a month. We actually sit down and we will reevaluate this quite often. And we'll say, all right, for the business, I am on my list of I handle Facebook ads. I handle training the new people. I handle training the new coaches. And my wife does the webinars and does the one-on-ones, right? And then on both, things that we work on together, like creating new ads. We have so much fun with that. So we put that on both. Now, when you're done, no cheating, no looking at each other's notes. I do recommend you do this with food because that just makes everything better. And then you sit down and you exchange notes when you're done. If you're first married or you're newly married or you're newly working with someone, it's probably not going to match. And that's okay. That's expected. Now, though, you are outside of the moment where the expectation has been crashed or dashed, right? And you can actually have a discussion saying, okay, I put laundry, like we did household, right? I put laundry on your work, honey. And she's like, well, I put it on yours. So now we get to negotiate a little bit. We're like, okay, cool. Neither one of us like laundry, but why don't we try something? How about you wash it and bring it up to the bedroom and dump it on the floor? I will fold it and put it away. So I don't have to worry about keeping track of all the cycles of laundry throughout the day, but at the end of my day, I sit down and I fold laundry. This is actually our current plan that's going on right now. And it works great. And we're like, okay, we both agree. We both hate it, but we're getting it done. So it turned into the both category. But when you handle unspoken expectations outside of the moment when they're not met, you can actually resolve them and turn them into agreements. Because there's a warning, unspoken expectations, speaking from experience, when left that way, are like seeds of resentment that can grow in the garden of your relationship.
And I love that. I got to unpack that. So, when you're saying this, I'm thinking unspoken expectations are rooted in so many breakdowns. I think of like gifts from, I don't need anything for this, my birthday or Mother's Day, but really a lot of times women do want something, but they don't want to have to ask for it. And men want other things that they don't want to have to ask for. So, how did you learn how to move from assumptions to agreements? Because I think we naturally do this as humans, right? We assume something and then we move through our day as humans, right? Because we're assuming humans constantly assessing situations. So, what changed for you to move from assumption, assumptions to agreements?
Oh, hands down, that's huge. So, perfect example. Like, I like the one you talked about gifts. A lot of couples have learned their love languages. They learn the love language of the other spouse. Love languages are really big because it's like learning another language. You may be outside of the Kremlin, right? And you're trying to take a picture in Russia, and everyone around you speaking Russian, and you don't understand a lick of it. And it's just kind of like, wah, like I don't know, the teacher from Peanuts or something. It doesn't make sense. But then all of a sudden, you hear someone yell, "Hey, over here, this is a great place to take a picture." You immediately tune into that because that's your native language. So a lot of times people will have native languages in their love languages. Like for me, I'm touch, but my wife is time. And so for me, I go by, I give my wife a hug, I give her a kiss on the cheek, and I'm good. I'm fed. I moved on. But I was speaking French, and she don't speak French. Whereas she's time, and she's like, "Will you stop cleaning? Will you just sit down and spend time with me?" I was like, "What do you mean? I love you. I'm trying to clean." So when you identify an area, and here's the easiest way to identify an area where there is an unspoken expectation. It frustrates you to think about it. When you recall that memory, when you recall that moment, you're like, "Ooh, I don't like that." There's a reason. There's an expectation there that's not being met. So I'm mad at my wife this morning, and I'm like, "Why am I mad?" "Oh, because your meeting was supposed to end at 8 because I had an 8 o'clock meeting and she's not upstairs yet." So I had an expectation that she would be timely and with her meetings, but it ran over, right? So now I was like, "Okay, let me write that down." Best thing to do, take note of those moments. And then don't deal with them in the moment. Sit down, have a date night, do the exercise, and go through each other. What really does help too is picking a category. I'm going to say that again, just really important. If it's housework, pick housework. If it's business, it's pick business and stick with that. You're welcome to do all the above. I just wouldn't do them all at the same time because it's just a long list.
I love that. Okay, so that's principle one. What is principle two?
All right. So you have turning unspoken expectations into agreements. And this one released a lot of the pressure for me at work as well as in our house. This one's called his business, her business, and not your business. I've also heard it taught your business, their business, and God's business. But his business, her business, and not your business is an understanding, a mind shift. I am responsible and have full control over everything I feel, think, do, and create. One of the really powerful stories that I was reading is a guy who survived the Holocaust, and he had very little control over his environment. But he came out the other side incredibly mentally strong, forgiving his captors, and just like, "Wow, what happened?" He said, "I had still full control of my thoughts. No one could take that from me." And I was like, "Ooh, that's some powerful, powerful stuff right there." And so when you say, "I have full control over my thoughts, my feelings, my emotions, what I think, do, and create," it means if I control what I think, I can control what I do because thoughts turn into actions. Actions become habits. Habits define your character, and your character will shape your destiny. So if you want a better future, change the way you're thinking. Now, here's where it gets dangerous. You are not responsible for, thus, her business, right? In my case, what she thinks, feels, does, and creates. So this concept of I can create an environment, I'm responsible for that, one where my wife feels loved. My wife's love language is time. And so I set up what I call couch time, and I set aside where the kids are distracted for 5 minutes. We can sit on the couch, hold each other's hands, look into each other's eyes, and spend some time together, right? I try to do that. I really make an effort to do that. But if she doesn't feel loved in that, that is not my responsibility. My responsibility was to create the environment. This was a profound concept for this one lady. We were teaching this in a class, and she goes, and we're like, "Whoa, you okay?" She's like, 90% of my anxiety is because I'm constantly focusing on how my husband feels. I'm like, "Yeah, you are not responsible for his feelings. You're responsible for the environment you create. And if you focus on that, you don't have to worry about his feelings. He'll take care of those." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, I'm gonna try." So for the next, I think a week and a half, she was like, "I'm just focusing on the environment I'm creating that he feels loved in it." She's like, "It exploded because I'm no longer asking him all these, 'Do you love me?' questions," right? He's like, "Wow." The last but not least, too, this one is really hard. Perfect example. I just had a conversation with this with a director of a SOC, and this is called what we call God's business or not your business. This is things that are completely outside your control and the control of others. So think about like a hurricane, right? An act of God. If the hurricane's coming in Florida, I can sit here and I can stress about it all I want, but all that does is cause me anxiety. When I focus on what I think, feel, do, and create, and I let God handle what he feels, thinks, does, and creates, or not my business, then I focus on what can I create? Well, I can create an evacuation plan. I can create a disaster recovery plan. I can create an incident response plan. I can have this ready to rock and roll. So when disaster strikes, I have a plan. When you focus on what's in your circle of influence and you let go of control and trying to focus and control other people's, your anxiety level massively decreases. Perfect example of this. So I guess part 3 of 4 or part 2 of 4 of the lasagna story. That lasagna my wife made, I ate a piece because I was a good husband. I ate a piece. But then she made a 9 by 13 pan of it and she put it in the fridge. Well, you can kind of guess how this goes. So I go to work and I'm opening the fridge and I'm looking for food and I'm like, lasagna, moldy cabbage. I'll take this. I didn't eat it. I didn't touch it. She was so mad at me because she's like, you didn't like my lasagna. You should have eaten it. And she was in my business. She was in what I think, feel, do, and create. And she got very upset about it. In fact, she made 5 different recipes over the first couple of years of our marriage. I didn't like any of them. I didn't eat any of them. Oh, she knows this. It's really fun when we get to share this story together because she tells her perspective of it as well. But yeah, that's a perfect example. She was focusing on what was outside of her control. When you focus on what you can control, let me take this from like a cyber perspective. I cannot control the ransomware that went into a system, but I can control how I'm prepared for it and how to handle it. I cannot control the fact that someone's going to try to scan and attack my network, but I can control how my defenses are ready for it. And so stop stressing about what's outside your control, focus on what's inside your control, and then rock it. When you put all your mental energy into what's inside your control, you are way more prepared to handle the stuff that's outside your control.
I love that. That's so good. So many questions in that. And I think a lot of time, kind of going back to your analogy where she was supposed to be, you were supposed to be on a call at 8 and she was running late from a meeting. Now, how do you figure out whose business is whose? Like, whose is more important at that point? Like, how does that, agreement work with whose business are you in at that time?
A lot of it actually goes back to the first exercise, right? You sit down and you're like, okay, I have these expectations that you are going to create the ad for this week or whatever the case is. And I didn't create it. She's like, wait, I thought you were going to do that. Well, that was an unspoken expectation. So when you sit down and you have a meeting, like, okay, this is within my business. One of the things we teach people too is to operate within their strengths. We use something called Gallup-Clifton Strengths to help them understand who they are as a person. And oh my gosh, that was amazing. That is incredible. And so for me, I'm high influencing. I'm really good at winning people over, having conversations. So a lot of the podcasts we do, the webinars, any public speaking on stages. I was just at a summit a couple weeks ago. I do that because I love it. I eat it up. I love this stuff. But my wife's really good at community. So she does like the webinars where we do one-on-one teachings. She does a lot of the training and coaching directly with people. She also really helps wives understand their husbands because she's helped me with that and vice versa. She's really good at connecting people. She's also really good at coming up with ideas. So when we sat down with our business and we said, okay, I'm good at this, I'm just going to own it. And she's like, I'm good at this, I'm going to own it. When you operate in what you love to do, it brings so much satisfaction.
Oh, I love that. That's so good. Okay, so I'm gonna pause on 2. We're gonna put a pin in 2, and we're gonna move to the third key. Tell us what the third key is.
Okay, third part to the lasagna story. I was at work, and this was back probably about 6 years ago, and my boss and I were just in the break room talking about our favorite meals. Well, of course, I mentioned lasagna, and he goes, oh man, my wife makes an amazing lasagna. I'll have her make you one, and you can take it home to your wife and kids. All I could think was, oh God, please don't. Like, I'm gonna get in so much trouble. The next day, I show up at work. In the work break room fridge is a 9 by 13 pan with kiwi written across the top. I open it up. It's lasagna, and it looked good. So I bumped into my boss, and he's like, did you see it? He gave me the instructions. And so I thought, do I take this home and possibly have a fight with my wife, or do I leave it here and disappoint my boss? But I also thought this might be the first time in my marriage I've actually had good lasagna. So I took it home. My wife finds it. She opens the fridge. She sees it. She goes, "What's this?" She talks just like that too. And I'm like, food. She's like, "Where'd you get it?" My boss's wife made it. I will never forget her words. She goes, closes the fridge. She looks at me, puts her hands on her hips and says, "Couldn't get it from your wife, so you had to get it from another man's wife, huh?" And thus was one of our greatest arguments ever. And so everyone has them. Everyone has unspoken expectations. Everybody ends up in somebody else's business, and then we end up in a fight over it. So how do you win every argument every time guaranteed? Again, a lot of this is a mindset shift and perspective. If you think back to when you're first married and you're holding hands at the altar and you're looking at each other, you're googly-eyed, and you're like, "I'll take on the world with you." But then the kids come along, and then you start a business together. And now it's like, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem, you're the problem. And that's how it goes. The truth is, it's not you're the problem. It's not someone has to lose. It's not happy wife, happy life. That actually ends up in kind of resentful husband, to be honest. And you want a happy marriage. So here's the shift. It's you and me versus the problem. Let's take this from like a management perspective. Say we have a manager and he's told he has to cut costs. And you have an employee who wants a raise. And they have a meeting. You can see how that goes, right? Well, what if the manager and the employee came together and they said, "It's you and me versus the problem"? They said, "What's the real problem here?" Well, the real problem is that the company is not bringing in enough profit. The real problem is the company is not as profitable it could be. Because if the company was more profitable, we wouldn't have to cut costs so hard, and the employee could have the raise they're looking for. So now the manager and employee say, "Okay, you and me, how can we work together and bring in more profit?" When you do it in your marriage, this is one that, like, if you have kids, which I do have 3, and you get in a car, look at each other before you start driving and go, "Same team." It's you and me versus the problem. So when you approach every problem and every argument with "it's you and me versus the problem," you guys are now united on the same front to attack it. Now, sometimes it takes a little bit because you may feel like they're the problem or what they're doing is the problem. You got to really sit down and look at each other and be like, "Okay, I want to find the real problem here." And usually it's not what you think. 9 times out of 10, it's an unspoken expectation. That's usually what it falls back on, which is why I teach these in this order, because for our marriage, a lot of it was, even with the lasagna.
I love that. I think there's so much wisdom in coming together to resolve conflict because everybody comes out winning. I want to switch gears on you a little bit. I love the cybersecurity analogy because I also work in cybersecurity. Now, you lead SOC IR teams managing incident responses, like you mentioned, across complex environments. How has your work in cyber helped you identify emotional intelligence? And then, kind of the second part to that, how does this play into your leadership style?
Oh my goodness. So I was a very logical individual. I was in the Navy for 8 years. They taught me to be a hacker, and then I started working DoD after that. And computers are logical. They're 1 or they're 0. There's no middle, right? This is just how they operate. However, humans are not. And so the interesting part, I'm going to just go cyber a little bit, but when you think like a hacker, the most successful attacks are psychological ones. Because technology changes, AI changes, and things evolve fast. What doesn't change is psychology. The number one factor for people is curiosity. They're like, "Ooh, I want to click that." We click stuff so often because we're just straight up curious. And so when you learn a lot more of the psychology aspects and you have the more emotional intelligence, when it comes to assessing how a threat actor is going to act, you can actually kind of get inside their head. And when you're a defense person and you're fighting against that, you can have a very understand and predictable, this is how they do it. We call it pattern of life. So without getting super technical, this is how people tend to act. These are what are called TTPs, tools, tactics, and procedures that threat actors will use on your environment. From the opposite side of the house, right? Say I'm in a meeting with a customer, this actually happened, and they're really mad because their system's encrypted and our SOC was supposed to watch it, right? Well, it's you, me versus the problem. They feel like we're the problem. We feel like you didn't secure your environment like you were told to. They're the problem. And the real problem is there's a threat actor in the system. Right? Let's start with one. Let's prioritize and execute, and let's take care of this threat actor. Another one too is unspoken expectations. When we're talking with salespeople and they're like, "Oh, well, you'll do all this for our customers, right?" No. We need to make sure we're all on the same page. Sit down and be like, "This is what we do. This is what we can do. This is what we don't." So that way, when the customer comes in, they have an understanding and an expectation of, I know what's expected of me and what's expected of you, which goes and leads into his business, her business, and not your business. These three things alone, and there's many more, but these three things alone, having an understanding, after I got done with this coaching with my wife a couple years ago, she and I sat down and we started to apply these to our lives. While I was at work, I actually was shifted. I used to be a manager of a security operations center incident response team where we dealt with ransomware. I got moved into a senior, more manager director level, and I was managing multiple teams because I was really good at helping managers see how to work directly with their employees. So even though you may be in a highly technical job, learning how to work with people, how they understand what their needs are, how help them understand his business, her business, and not your business, and how to work with them when you have disagreements. You can revolutionize any attack vector, stop any threat, and work as a team to meet any patch management plan.
Ooh, I love that. And as a fellow techie, and for leaders that are listening in heavy tech environments, which is, mostly introverted in my experience, working with a lot of these individuals, what advice would you give them in your experience on how they can show up not only professionally to do a job, to do a cybersecurity job, but how can they show up personally?
So personally and professionally, I don't feel like those should always have to be different. Now, I know some people that their personality is not appropriate HR wise professionally. Let's just be real. A lot of these guys are vets, and so I get them because I was a vet. I'm a vet myself. But when you come into work, you should never feel like you have to put on a front. You should never feel like you can't be your authentic self. One of the things that we teach in our coaching, and I've done this coaching for IT professionals, I've done it for entrepreneurs. I've done it for couples in network marketing. Across the board, this is the truth. When you learn how to be authentically you and give your best self, don't change a thing about you. In fact, embrace who you are. And the skills and talents that you have, just like every superhero, you got to learn how to use them. And it helps to have a guide along the way. But when you do that and you show up to work as your authentic self, you give your best to the world. And when you give your best to the world, whether you're an employee to your boss or a husband to your wife or a director to your entire operations center, when you give your best, they give their best and they feel safe to do it. So I would leave on that note with that. When you have an environment where people feel safe to be genuinely who they are at their core and they're safe to do that, they'll innovate. They'll show up to work early. They'll give it their best and they'll operate in a way that honors who they are, and your productivity and profit will go through the roof.
Yeah, because 'cause they're aligned. They're aligned, would you say, with the mission? They feel like they're part of a team, and they're pulling and working hard, and so I love that. I think that's a great example. Now I'm curious, David, I'm sure everybody else is curious. Did your wife ever find that perfect lasagna recipe for you?
And no, she didn't. After a couple of years, she gave up. But 10 years later, uh, um, she swallowed her pride and she made the walk to my mom's house and she sat down at the kitchen table with my mom. She looked across at her and said, I gotta know, what's this recipe that David loves? I've tried everything. I've given up. Can you just share with me this amazing recipe that he apparently loves? Because she loved me. She wanted to make the right thing. My mom looked at her across the table, shocked, in like surprise. She shrugged and she said, what recipe? I always bought it frozen from the store. True story. And when my wife told me that, oh, I felt awful. I was like, I am so sorry. Apparently, I like Walmart Stouffer's lasagna. That's what I like, apparently.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
But it goes to show you, we literally argued over that for over 10 years, 13, 14 years of marriage. And that's now the funniest part of our story, but that was a source of conflict our whole marriage because we weren't willing to sit down and talk it through until we did it together. But now it's one of the funniest things we have.
That is such a great story. I love it. David, I want to get any final thoughts or anything we didn't touch on that you want to leave with our listeners.
The biggest thing is I would say the world needs who you are and the best version of it. When you learn to give that, whether you're a leader, a husband, a stay at home mom, an entrepreneur, or a network marketer, the world needs your message and your voice. You are worth it.
I love that. That's fantastic. You've been a perfect blend of humor, vulnerability, real leadership, and it's rare for me that I get to talk to somebody in cybersecurity. So it's been a blessing to talk to you today, and I'm sure the listeners are going to feel the same way. I want to get what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you? Is it an email? Is it social media? Share how they can connect with you.
Absolutely. My name is pretty unique. It's David Kiwimagi, but everyone calls me Kiwi in my friend circle. You can follow us on social media. If you search my name, I am the only one on the planet with my name. My wife is Alexis, same last name. So you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We share a lot of our videos there. So if you just want more advice, more encouragement, here's some fun stories. We do lots of shenanigans. You can follow us there. If you're actually interested in getting a little bit more from us, being part of our coaching programs, check us out at davidandalexiskiwi.org.
Thank you so much for talking to us. You've given us a new way to look at lasagna and incident response. That's the Executive Connect podcast.